then she met a guy and she
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what?
Welcome to Board of Education Business Committee. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Hokkien and speaking people where we live, learn, and play. Motion to adopt the agenda, please. Trustee BEBC, Trustee Schmidt, all in favor? Passed. Minutes of the May 23rd, 2023 Board of Education Business Committee meeting. Board of Education and Business Committee adopt the minutes of the May 23rd, 2023 Board of Education Business Committee meeting. Trustee BEBC, seconder. Trustee Strachan, all in favor? Motion carried. Action list.
There's nothing on the action list, Chair.
Nothing on the petitions and delegations. We have none. Learning updates. Darlene Reynolds and Kim Derbyshire. You're up.
Of course, we came over like typical educators, made sure everything was working and ready to go. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that it is still behaving nicely. It is. That's awesome. So I squeal, TM, not see yet. Good day, respected friends. First, let me express gratitude for a bit of time this evening that we can share with you some updates regarding the learning initiatives around the district. And if you noticed, I did chat with Robin ahead of time and said, can I give him some sneak peeks as well? Like, I know the purpose is to give you updates on what's happened this past year and what the vision is, but we also are excited about some things that are in the works, and we thought you might enjoy having a few sneak peeks. So this evening, we're going to spend the next hour and a half speaking. No, I'm just kidding. I could, and if you gave me the opportunity, I probably would. I apologize. I should have introduced my partner in crime and colleague, Kim Derbyshire. She is our district vice principal of inclusive learning. So, hello, Miss Dolly. Are you joining us?
Do the opening.
Was Dolly doing an opening with us? So Kim has been instrumental in getting some of these pieces off the ground. So we wanted to make sure we had her voice with us this evening as we gave you updates on these three really big ideas in our district: the literacy framework, the launch of the numeracy framework, and the new reporting order guidelines for our district that I know is on your agenda as well. I will apologize in advance. In former districts that I worked with, I've been accused of maybe being a little bit too excited about the work, and I know Kathy has seen a little bit of this when we've had conversations with ministry reps, with our partners looking at our vessels. So if I get a little excited, please forgive me for that, but it is important work that we're extremely proud of. I also pause at the beginning of any time that I have an opportunity to share with any group to acknowledge that while I am very fortunate to be the one here to share a voice with you, this is not my work. This absolutely represents the work of many, many educators across our district, our QP members, our teachers, our administrators. All have had a voice at the table. And if you spent more than 6 weeks with me, you know that when I talk about the work we do, we really focus intentionally on accordion communication. So from across the district, we recognize and identify important work that needs to happen, insights of our educators. We bring that together in our district to capture that voice. We draft ideas, we create things, and then we put it back out to the field for their feedback. So an example of that is last fall, we launched our literacy assessments across the whole district. Every teacher, K-9 in our district, was checking on our learners' reading skill development. And I know you saw a lot of the results of that work in the spring at BEBC when our schools were here presenting on their data. In the spring, Kim brought together that formal committee again. We shared with them very transparently all the feedback from teachers across the district, which parts of that feedback we were able to make adjustments because sometimes people give us feedback that we can't respond to. It actually needs to stay the way it was for purpose, but we do listen to the feedback and respond to it and make the adjustments. So that team came back together with Kim and we made a multitude of changes for those assessments to make them better for our teachers and better for our learners. So again, this work represents many across the district, not just at this time, but I also want to acknowledge for thousands of years before us, there were educators here that had begun the journey. And for many folks, even in the room, I always give appreciation to Cheryl, leading some of this work before my arrival. So we want to make sure we honor and acknowledge all the input of others. In your packet this evening, I believe you received a plethora of pages. Yeah, you probably saw that and went, wow, a lot of work, a lot that we're really, really proud of. And oh my gosh, I hope they don't talk about every page and make us read every page. So we thought we would kind of just highlight some things that are common across all of those pieces. The literacy framework, the numeracy framework, and the reporting order guidelines all have some of these really key pieces in it. The number one thing it has is Indigenous perspectives and ways of being. We do not start any process or any journey without pausing, giving reflection, and Dolly's nodding because we often consult with her and she looks at things with us, but we always begin the journey with what are the Indigenous perspectives and ways of being that needs to be central to this work and influence the work we're doing, and how can we do this in a way that is culturally respectful and responsive to our learners. We also believe fundamentally in play-based learning. All of us enjoy playing in different ways, but especially our primary learners. So while we're doing some important work around literacy and numeracy, it doesn't mean we're taking away the joy of learning, the inquiry, or the play-based learning. And I think Kim has some information about play-based learning and how it really infuses the work we do.
Yeah, just the idea of play-based learning and play-based assessment. It's pervasive through all of our documents because it's pervasive through our entire curriculum. And it's also really highlighted through the ministry reporting order. They talk a lot about play-based assessment. And Darlene mentioned primary students in particular, K to 3s. It's really important to focus on play-based learning and play-based assessment, but even intermediate and secondary. We can do observational learning and observational assessment, and whether we call that play or whether we call that activity, it doesn't matter. Students are always active, and there's lots of learning we can glean from observing students right up to their grade 12 year and beyond. And so that play-based idea that's really, runs the whole gamut of all of our learning initiatives, but also our assessment and reporting initiatives, because it is starting right at the ministry saying the research tells us this is how we get our information about our learners K through 12.
Yeah, and Kim mentioned the word assessment, and I have as well. I was reading through the notes from DPAC last week, and I appreciate how Robin with our parents reminded them that these assessments, they're not tests. They don't make our students feel like we're testing them. They actually are very play-based. They're a great opportunity for teachers to sit side by side with learners and actually get to know them and build a relationship while they're doing these activities that are actually fun, playing with words, and we're learning about where they're at with their reading. So that was deeply integrated into that journey. So both are.
Could you give me a for instance on a teacher and student side by side engaged in play-based activities and assessment?
Well, absolutely. With kindergarten, for instance, their oral language assessment provides an opportunity to actually observe students while they're playing, doing some activities. And you can imagine a little kindergarten student getting to spend time with a teacher one-on-one. And show me how you stand on one foot, or show me how you hop. And so we're seeing how they can respond to oral language and following directions. And we also have some of the assessments actually on iPads. So there's little animations. So those are part of the assessments. So, but both for both literacy and numeracy, what we've provided our teachers with our teachers, so we didn't make these up like off in a room over here. We brought teachers in and have designed assessments that they can use for both literacy and numeracy in the fall to see where our learners are, really design our instruction to meet our students' needs. And we focus on, we're understanding our learners' truth. So it's not coming from a judgment place, but where are our learners today and how are we going to support them in that journey? And the other piece is we have so many new teachers joining us, as I'm sure that you're very aware. Our curriculum is beautiful and it gives lots of space for teachers to be innovative. But for our newer teachers, it may not provide some of those really critical skills that they can target. And so we've provided that in both of these frameworks for grade levels. So a teacher can see exactly what are the critical skills for each grade level, and then the assessments that align. And we've provided good evidence-based resources at their fingertips. So they're not having to search. Sometimes we hear things about like teachers pay teachers, and not to be critical of that at all, but our teachers don't have the traditional textbooks that they had 20 years ago. So they're really creating and designing learning resources and materials. We wanted to provide that for them. So in both the literacy and numeracy frameworks, when you're reading those really in detail, you'll find that we have these one-page guides. So for literacy, you can see for grade 4, it takes all 5 of those critical areas of reading that I know that you've been hearing about now for 3 years. Gives them targeted things to work on for each grade level. And Elizabeth's laughing because she's been right with this journey the whole time. And here there's links to all the resources that they can use to bring that instruction to life. And we've done the exact same thing for numeracy. So those are right there ready for our teachers to use. And so we wanted to give you how this is coming to life. Just a quick update. So this is year 2 of us doing the assessments with our learners, kindergarten to grade 9. It is underway. This is actually a screenshot from the data today. So one of the things that we have added is the pie graphs that let us see for grade levels where there are skill needs. Now, it is absolutely common to see lots of red this time of year. So it allows us to see where those areas of need are, but where we're going to go. I don't know why that changed.
Well, here, it's this one's you.
Okay.
That's
not me.
Claire's catching up.
Okay, hi Claire. So this is actually from one of our French immersion schools in grade 2. So you can see our French immersion schools are doing this as well as our English schools, and we can check and see where our learners are. What is exciting is that in the spring, when schools come to see you, I have no doubt that you will see screenshots of where their data was when they started in the fall, our learners' truth, and how we walk with them this year to support them and ensure that they are on track for becoming independent readers. We are committed to walking alongside our teachers and education assistants in the classroom. This in no way comes from a place of judgment, but very much about how we have mutual responsibility for how our learners are doing in their classroom. I do not see FSA data without feeling it personally about what we are all collectively doing to ensure our learners have the best education possible. So that's our mindset. Wanted to share with you some stories and some approaches. I know some of you attended Drinkwater last year when they were doing the presentation. So I wanted to share with you how that's actually coming to life in multiple schools across the district. We have made a very intentional decision to not host intricate professional learning or in-services where we bring 50 teachers together. Would anybody want to guess why that's not particularly effective? We struggle with TTOCs for one, so we never know how many will actually get here. And when you're presenting to a group of 50, then we aren't always capturing their attention or their focus and really what their needs are, because we all have different needs as learners, even as adults. So what we're doing instead is we're using those funds to go into schools to sit with teachers, to sit with Kathy, who's grade 3, and she has her data in front of her. And we work with Kathy to identify how she's going to design instruction for the learners in her classroom. So it's about responding to where we are at today in the classroom and helping school teams be able to really targeted instruction and intervention. At the same time, and look, they're actually smiling. They're having a good time. This is looking at data too, by the way. We also do recognize that there are some resources that our teachers are excited to be learning more about. So we are also hosting additional opportunities for our educators to get together to really just have conversations about those resources, try them, give feedback, help each other out. So we're doing both of those to really support the data and the learning in our schools.
I'm just going to go back a couple of slides, and I've been debating whether to ask. I know it's a stupid question, but so you were talking about the kids' abilities in the grade 2 French immersion. Okay, so at the beginning of the year there's a lot of red. By the end of the year there's a lot of green. So why do that? I'm just saying you've got the assessment from grade 1, which is probably glowing green. Why? I just feel like why the different framing when they arrive in grade 2?
That's a really good question, and I wouldn't have gone into this detail, but what we've done with our assessments is every grade level, except for kindergarten, obviously, does go back and check on some of the skills from the previous year, so we can check and ensure that there aren't any gaps or holes. Every learner has a different truth when they walk in the door in September versus June, and we pre-assess some of that year's learning. So sometimes our learners, they all learn differently at different rates and times. We may discover that we have to back up, do some of the work from the previous year, or we might recognize that, like Darlene and Kim, need extra targeted work on these skills that maybe they missed last year. Because maybe, lots of different things can happen in learners' lives that they weren't ready to receive the information. So we have a bit of a safety net to check if they missed some of the skills from the previous year, and we're pre-assessing some skills from that year.
Is it fair to say it's sort of updating the baseline, so to speak? Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. And it allows me as a teacher to see which areas I need to focus on whole class, which areas that maybe I just need a little small group to give this 5 or 6 kiddos a little boost, versus maybe just Darlene has lots of area and she needs really lots of extra support. So it can help us differentiate. So again, this is really what we've been able to do in the past few years, is provide our teachers real-time data. We are actually providing release time so they can work with our coordinators side by side as in-service approach, and absolutely committed to that ongoing collaboration and support. I'm not sure if Kim has anything to add with those pieces. Or should we just have the drum roll for
this great, amazing soft launch of another enormous document in your packages, which is the numeracy framework. So numeracy was always on the docket. It was always the next thing that was coming. And the reason we're soft launching numeracy is because we're being kind to our system, our staff, and our students. There was a lot of new learning over the last couple of years around those 5 components, but then last year with the launch of the screenings and the assessments, the launch of the data dashboard, inputting information, analyzing that data, and then acting on it, as you say. We use that data to tell the whole story, and then we sort of triangulate that data with other things we know, and sometimes it gives us the impetus to look into other things, and that's also why that beginning of the year did. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to say. So the numeracy framework is the other thing that the ministry is telling us is multidisciplinary throughout all of our curricular areas. So K to 12, every single subject area has numeracy competencies that students will be demonstrating and we will be assessing, and it's part of applying to life, and those application of life skills for providing success after graduation is having number sense and computational fluency. Those are really the two things. And so this numeracy framework has some of that background information for instructional strategies and practices from K to 12. And it also will eventually, it's under construction. We weren't going to say that, which is why I'm doing the bunny ears. It's under construction. We decided that that was code for we're not ready. We will eventually have screeners, and our system is very aware that the numeracy screeners were a soft launch this year, this fall into, you know, the sort of later areas of the fall. We will be starting with some of our numeracy screeners so that we can start to collect some of that numeracy data around our students as well. So if you flip through that numeracy screener, that numeracy framework, you'll find lots of really good information, some background, some understandings, but the really, Darlene showed us earlier in one of the slides, those instructional resources, and the instructional resources are aligned with both curricular competencies, so curricular learning standards, and also with some of the assessment and critical skills. Darlene mentioned that we based all of our frameworks on critical skills that were collaboratively determined by our system, sort of that going out and getting information and bringing it back. And so those instructional resources are a collaboration of multi-districts and multiple opportunities for feedback and collaboration within our own system. And they really do provide some real hands-on material strategies for teachers to be able to implement those numeracy critical skills in their classrooms, regardless of subject area and regardless of grade. So each grade level has an instructional resource package that provides some links to some hands-on instructional strategies, but also provides materials and resources that would support those strategies in the classrooms at that grade level. And we have collected those resources so that those schools and teachers can put kits together that support implementing those instructional strategies. Numeracy, we're really excited about it. We've had lots of really good feedback. I know I don't sound as excited as Darlene does. This has been a good learning curve for me too, but as we go, we really do, the entire team is really realizing just how important these skills are for our learners and how closely integrated they are with literacy skills. So the numeracy framework is a new document. It is a soft launch. We've got it on the a website we're going to tell you about in a little bit. But what you see in front of you is how we're launching it. That's what's going to go out to the system.
And I remember when I was in elementary school, high school, often when we were doing numeracy, it became computation. And it really wasn't focused on us understanding the mathematics, but able to regurgitating formulas. So I had to sneak in a little bit of a numeracy slide. I'm not sure anybody else gets my math humor, but after lots and lots of research and really looking at what most impacts student learning in the area of mathematics or numeracy, these are really the three key components. So the work that we're doing will focus on these three areas. Teachers understanding the mathematics they're teaching, understanding place value, because how did most of us learned mathematics through computation and just practicing, right? Didn't really have to understand what it meant when you were borrowing from the tens place or the hundreds place. But actually to teach mathematics and numeracy well, you need to understand the math. The second really key ingredient, because we do mathematics when we're cooking, right, is teachers understanding their learners. The students in front of you are different every year, and it never changes. You know, we never move away from what their needs are. Social, emotional, feeding futures, all those things are a key part of this work, absolutely. But understanding how students interact with learning is an important part of this. And then knowing instructional practices. So when I, as an educator, I'm really well equipped with those three things, then I flex into and out of those approaches. So certain programs, like no one program is going to meet the needs of the learners in your classroom. This is what really empowers teachers to be efficient and effective in supporting their learners' mastery of mathematics. and numeracy. So we really are focusing on supporting our educators with this. And Kim, you're right, they really weren't over impressed with my formula or my pun there.
It's math humor.
I was trying.
Yeah. The knowledge of students, it's just part of that identity around subject areas too. I think mathematics and maybe PHE are the ones that as adults, we probably have identity as learners about. And so knowing that identity as a learner in that subject area for our students is really important to create the whole picture as well. I already went ahead to this because I was so excited. So I spoke about the instructional considerations. This is the screener page. This is where our screeners will be, so that teachers can just click directly on the screener and find that for their grade level. And then these are the instructional resources, and this is what I was talking about with the strategies that teachers, educators can click on and find the hands-on material strategy that aligns with that learning standard for that grade level that they can access right then and
So
there.
what's really cool is like when you look at the critical skills for the different grade levels, the assessments align to that. So if we identify needs for learners, there's resources here. They're not disjointed. We very carefully looked at our BC curriculum. To be honest, this framework began about 1.5 years ago with about 20 of our teachers from across the district, across grade levels in the Inspire room. And we had our BC curriculum, we had math standards, all laid out over tables, and just around the entire room was kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, all the way around. What are those things that we most want our learners to learn in each of those levels? And do they align and bring vertical alignment? Because sometimes our curriculum actually leaves little gaps. And so we were able to identify those and fill them in with our framework for our educators. So, and another big move this summer, I'm sure if you had your TVs on, you probably saw some news reports about proficiency skills and the community's response to that. So Kim and the team last year worked and developed our reporting guidelines that allows us as a system to respond to that new reporting order.
Yeah, and lucky for us, this new reporting order didn't change much because this district was a bit of a front runner and had changed a lot of those things several years ago when this was in draft in 2016-17. So it was a real bonus for our system to have this student reporting policy implemented on July 1st and have very little impact on our system. But of course, we did require new guidelines to reflect the policy, which came into effect on July 1st, 2023. And so that is also in your package. And we should talk a little bit about some of the things that are new and some of the things that stayed the same. So the things that stayed the same are the 5 contacts home, that letter grades and percentages will still be on transcripts for grades 10 through 12 courses. Written comments in K-9. As well as required in 10 through 12, and that as a result of the draft policy in 2016, students were doing self-reflections of core competencies. So what's in K-9? So what's new? What's changed? Watch this. It's almost like nothing changed, except there's a few things that changed. We do have a grad status update that is required in order to provide parents with information about the grad program for their specific student. So families now are able to, on a summative report card, they're able to see on a learning update, written learning update. Those are other things that have changed, the terminology, shocker, I know. Written learning updates will have a grad status update so that families are able to be able to see the accumulated credits for a student in the grad program from 10 through 12 and be able to understand what they need to acquire in order to be on track for graduation.
How does this benefit the Indigenous student who's a slow learner, has a hard time, and based on his or her lack of ability to keep up with a lot of this stuff and there's nothing there to help them? What kind of grad are they going to have? Is it going to be like an evergreen? Because if it is, that really offends me.
I understand that. Yeah. Did you want to?
I'm happy to. You know, we are absolutely committed, even with, if we think about the literacy and numeracy assessments, even connected to this, is we're being more intentional on checking on every single learner. And whether they're in grade 2 or grade 9, if we recognize that there are skills that they need, how do we as a system respond and support them? So that's definitely a commitment that we have and work that we're doing to prevent that. We also want to make sure that we give space for our learners to be able to go across the stage with dignity and purpose and pride, fully equipped. And we want to make sure that they have the skills to do that. So while we are working to make sure that they have the opportunities to not fall behind, be proactive is our first approach. And then make sure that we're providing the support they need to be on track for graduation is what's really important.
Can I just add a little bit? Sure. Okay. There's also lots of different paths to graduation, and the Dogwood diploma is absolutely the goal for all of our learners, is the Dogwood diploma. And there's lots of different paths to receiving that Dogwood. And so what's also really important is ensuring that everyone in our system, our counselors, our administrators, our teachers, everyone who's connected with every learner understands all of the paths and is super connected, so that early enough we are able to guide that learner on that path towards that Dogwood diploma in the way that's best for them.
One of the things that frustrates me is when I hear all this stuff, it sounds good, but I'm one of those guys you gotta show me. I'm just worried that if an individual doesn't achieve what you set out and doesn't fully understand, he or she is not going to be told, we're going to give Eduardo an evergreen. And Eduardo won't know what he's got till he tries to go for a job and finds out he's got to go back and upgrade. That's the kind of stuff that our people deal with all the time. And this sounds good, but still, I'd like to watch some of the indigenous kids and see how they progress before I jump on board and say, I think this is awesome.
Joe, one thing I recognize is I have learned that historically in our district, that was something that happened, that our students finished with evergreens and not dogwoods and weren't fully informed of what that meant or that it was occurring. And I can tell you, we have changed our policies and practices so that doesn't occur today.
Good, because our kids are intelligent, they're not special needs.
In fact, I had, you would have been proud, we had a family call that wanted their student to get an evergreen. And we saved the course and we said, we believe that your child, your learner can and will earn a dogwood. And we just walked through them. One thing that's nice about what the ministry's required with this grad requirement piece is it's transparent. So now on every report card, grade 10 through 12, families will see that their child, their learner is on track for graduation or what they need to be prepared for that. So we'll be able to respond.
I do worksheets for sports to move into the NCAA, and often I have a grade 9 column. So are universities recognizing that we no longer can offer a grade? Like, are they throughout so kids can still go for scholarships and things without having that grade 9 column properly filled out? Like, has that been caught up?
Yeah, so actually many Div 1 universities are actually changing that policy because of a recognition of what's happening north of the border.
Excellent.
But those that are not,
Yeah.
we do have a caveat in the student reporting policy that says that when a letter grade is requested, we can provide.
Okay.
But you can imagine the difficulty because it's not a conversion from a proficiency and a formative based, competency based assessment to a letter grade or a percentage. And so that would be some consultation with the actual teacher assigned to that learner. But anything's possible. We will do anything for kids. And if a student in grade 9 has a future in a Div 1 university, we'll make it happen.
So the universities are trying to.
They are changing. Many of them are.
Because I know a lot of my forms, my worksheets, grade 9 still sitting there. So I just.
And we have a backup plan to respond to that. So we can add letter grades if we need to, if they're really holding on to that slightly antiquated practice.
Okay,
Perfect, thank you.
there's one more question.
So in terms of of this assessment, is this something that can improve the outcomes and educational experiences for special needs kids? And if so, how does that all fit together? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll do it a hold and see if we catch that as we go forward. Anything else?
I
with
think
the-
we can move forward, yeah.
Is this the slide?
No, but this is just a comment about student self-reflection, because I think you did notice that part of the requirements of reporting is that there's student-generated content around student self-reflection. And that didn't just come out of nowhere. It is research-based. That students who are contributing authors to their own learning stories, actually their learning is actually shows more growth. And that they are actually accurate reflectors of their own learning and they're accurate predictors of their own success, more accurate than we are. And so we just wanted to be clear that the student self-reflection, although we support it fully, it is a ministry guideline that is based in research for sure. And the next one.
Well, I was going to say, one thing I want to add to this is what a beautiful place where we're starting to empower our learners as early as kindergarten and grade 1 to be contributing to their educational journey, to be part of that. We're hearing their voice about what they're learning, what they need to work on next. They're part of this. They're setting goals for themselves. And I think if you think about those life skills we need as adults, how many of us wish that would have been more a part of our education earlier on?
About that. I love that. And I'm curious though how that's tracked by the learners. Like, is it, because my kids, like, they'll bring home like a hard copy or whatever, then lose track of it at home and it ends up in a pile of paper. Like, how is that? Is that tracked digitally that students have access to, the learners have access to, or how is that so that they can go back in time? Like, I'm curious around that.
Are you referring to the self-reflections?
Yeah.
So it depends on how it is being accessed within their classroom. So it's kind of the requirement is that we are reporting that students are self-reflecting and that the content is self-generated. So often it might be in a digital portfolio, it might be in a paper portfolio, it might be attached, it should be attached to a report card. The intent is it's not for the system to track their ongoing self-reflection, because we're not here to assess their self-assessment. But it's possible that the learner could keep those written self-reflections over time, for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't so much about the system tracking. It's more like what ability do they have to store or to keep those records for themselves over the course of time.
And a big part of that is actually the practice of me self-reflecting and setting my goals and checking in. So not necessarily going back and looking at a piece of paper, but the skills that I'm equipped with as I'm growing as a learner to do those reflections. So, I'm sure that teachers have lots of creative, brilliant ways to keep a portfolio for learners. It's just not really part of the tracking that we're doing at the district level. Here it is, Miss Elizabeth, we promised.
Although I did read something my son wrote in grade 3 just last night, and it said, Mom is really fun and Dad is fun too. So I think we might want to track it. Okay. So this is an inclusive policy, and this is a real sort of point of pride for the ministry that this policy has come out to be fully inclusive for all learners. So all students, regardless of program, regardless of exceptionalities, designations, regardless of French immersion, online learners, career, dual, it doesn't matter. All students are under the same policy, and they will receive regular communications in the same way their peers. That aligns with regular reporting periods. And in the past, we had, specific reporting times for IEP progress reports and specific reports for IEP progress reports. And this policy is intended to say we are inclusive in the way that we provide learning. We're inclusive the way that learning is assessed, and we're inclusive in the way that learning is reported. We all receive the same reports at the same time.
So it ensures that our families are getting those access to those updates in a consistent, predictable way. It ensures that all of our learners are involved in the self-assessments, the goal setting, self-reflection now. I have to learn the new transition to language, that all of our learners are part of this journey and getting this information along with their families. I'm just going to say for one moment, I told Kim I wanted this in the framework and she argued with me, but
I would never.
maybe just a little.
So our framework is, as you can see, 26 or 27 pages long or whatever it is. And we really wrestled with every word and whether or not it was necessary. And we believe in the why as much as the what, and so much of the the why was left in. There's some templates, there's some, supporting documents and supporting materials, but what we heard really loud and clear from the system, from someone else, was a one-page access to what a teacher might need going into a reporting period, just a one-page document. What am I reporting when? What does it look like? What does my proficiency scale look like? And so we did create these kind of one-pagers that are in the document, but they're also linkable in the, all of these documents, by the way, are really intended to be interactive and online. There's lots of links inside them. They're linkable in the table of contents as well. So that there's just a quick win access to what I need as an elementary teacher and what I need as a secondary teacher to be able to move forward with fidelity in reporting and align with that policy and these guidelines.
So finding the balance of the whys and all that interest, things that we can all learn and grow with a practical, this is what I need to do today to bring this to life in my classroom. We recognize that our teachers need resources, at their fingertips so that they can do this important work. So we do have a template for the report cards that will go out, our learning updates. Our teachers can choose to use this or school with the principal approval. And we also, though, have information and resources for parents so they can understand these transitions. With the revisions in the curriculum a few years ago and revisions to this, we need to make sure our parents understand why we're changing some of the practices and ways that we're approaching this. And we also, in partnership with our union groups, recognize that we want consistent messaging across our district. I think Erin was at the table with us when we had this conversation and said we need a time, so we're bringing a principal with a teacher leader from each of our schools, ensuring they have a consistent message to take back to their schools so the school teams can have this access to this information as well in a quick, accessible way. Elizabeth, you had a question?
Well, I was thinking that, I'm sorry, I'm just wondering if there's sort of a case for presenting this directly to parents throughout the schools or offering them an educational experience. There have been times when DPAC and the district have put on sessions that were originally targeted at teachers and educational professionals. And it turns out, gee, the parents really needed to know that too. And I wonder if this would be a candidate for that, worth a conversation.
That is definitely worth a conversation, and thank you for that reflection. It is definitely DPAC has been at the table and aware of this in conversations as well as PI. And we've actually been encouraging school principals and given them resources that they can get out to families as well. But I think anybody would be open to having those.
A lot of resources come home.
A lot of resources come home, yes. But being available for opportunity for question and answer too would be helpful.
Yeah.
So I did say at the beginning, we were going to do those 3 big ideas and just a couple quick little sneak peeks of some work that is emerging. There's other things, but these are things that we're really proud of. One is we have just launched a guide to school-based team. And we did start that conversation with centering our school-based team around Indigenous perspectives and way of being and making sure that we're respecting a learner's journey in that process. But it gives us a way to connect all of our schools and their practices and being proactive and supporting learners. The other one is in draft, and I chatted with Adam about this earlier today. We've had a meeting. We've started to draft an education assistance guide. QP has our draft. We're waiting for their feedback and suggestions. And Adam made the suggestion at the table because, it might be really nice if when this is ready, we put both of our kind of stamp of approval on it. So that's the goal. I'm looking to make sure that I'm on the same page. I heard what you heard. So we're really excited about that piece. To give you an example of something that's in there for education assistance is how to communicate with families. We find in their very well-meaning, kind, caring ways, they get drawn into situations that don't feel good to them. So how can we give them the words and the language to create those healthy boundaries for themselves, so that we can protect those communication practices? And this is kind of not all lined up and pretty, if you notice, because it's in development. In addition to our literacy framework currently is very focused on students learning to read. Now we're ready to layer in written expression. We want to be respectful as we move things through our system. So now we're working through the written expression process. This will be a rubric that will go from grade 1 through 9. So we can track and see where a student is in their written expression skills and communication skills. So that will be there, as well as resources that's being designed. A couple of sneak peeks, and this is one that we're really excited about.
This is a video, I tried to freeze the video on a respectful photo of Dolly, but she's beautiful no matter how the video is frozen. But that's what I got. So this is our new, very, very exciting website. It's called Cowichan Learns. It is live. You can go to it. It is under construction, but there are some live pieces to it that are super useful and helpful. And one of them is the literacy piece. Cowichan Learns is the thing that we all have needed as educators to come together and find resources to support our instructional design, planning, assessment, and that's where everything here will be. So you can see that the 4 frameworks are linked right there at the top, and at the very top, the menus: literacy, numeracy, Indigenous education, and inclusive learning. So literacy right now links to all the screeners, so that yes, they're accessible through the literacy framework. They're also accessible in one click here. I didn't link it because I didn't want to mess around with Wi-Fi and whatnot, but you can go to Cowichan Learns anytime you want and play around.
And we thought we would end with a little bit of like, okay, do we put something kind of fun and not super professional? And we thought, oh, why not? So we're wondering if we made you tilt your head, if you have any questions, any other wonderings. You've been beautiful about asking questions as we went, but we also wanted to leave time and space for any other questions or thoughts.
Questions, Trustee Croft?
Just your PowerPoint presentations, because it's terrific. I could read everything I needed to read, and it was really good.
It's a little bit of a team effort. Kim starts them, and then I go in and do a little bit of work to them. So we're kind of back and forth. I always like it when she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome!" And I'm like, "Well, you kind of started it."
Mr. Thorne?
I really enjoyed the presentation. And yes, I kind of walked in at some Longhouse when a lot of the educators were sitting there, but I didn't see a lot of our own people there. And I looked and I kind of listened for a while, and I said, it's the same old stuff. And I walked away and I see this, and you reminded me of what I thought then, that I think now. We have an Indigenous department that should be concentrating on meeting with our communities, because a lot of them, parents especially, didn't have the education or the understanding because of our history. And they seldom sit with their children to do homework. I had a hard time with my girls when they were in college, learning things that I had never had when I was a kid, positives, negatives, stuff like that. And I had to learn with them. And I'd like to see our Indigenous department actually come up with a plan where we can fit. This is good for a lot of kids, but a lot of kids are my guy, they won't fit because they don't have the support that they really need at home. The parents want to help, but they don't know how to help because they can't. A lot of them can't read a lot. A lot of them can't write a lot. And they sort of step back. But I really like that. And I thought as I sat in Somna for that short while, I thought, if only we could teach this to our people, we wouldn't hear the same things over and over. I'm getting to an age where I'm starting to get more and more cranky. And I'm looking at things more different than I did when I first joined here 9 years ago. And we've come a long way. We've done a lot of great things. But that's the one missing ingredient that would bring our people to the top.
Is it okay if I respond? Joe, you don't sound cranky. You sound like you're holding us accountable as you should. And just to give you a couple examples, we are looking for those connections. This past summer, we were able to work with one of our local nations and went over the student data with them and did some reading intervention over the summer. And Jeff's been working with me as well with our Indigenous department. So when we get the data for our learners, for the affected children, we have permission to share. We can sit down with nations and with families and go over the data and talk to them about what things they could do at home that could be helpful. So we are looking for those ways to make that connection as well.
Trustee Schmidt.
So kids in care are my biggest passion, but with, a lot of kids that are in care are actually not in care. They're just surfing or whatever they may be. So how do they get caught? I mean, this is amazing, by the way. Thank you. But how do they get caught? Like, how do you keep them on track as well? Because they don't have adult guidance. They're just kind of trying to get through school, hopefully get the dogwood. Like, how does this fit them?
So thank you for asking that, because you've touched my heart with that one as well. One of the things that we're looking forward to this year is taking that data that we already have, our red, yellow, green data, which, I mean, we had a conversation about it today and said, this is great. Now what do we do with it? The number one factor that will support those students will be a connection, a relationship, a trust, a sense of belonging, a person in the school. And one of the things that we would like to connect all students in care, children in care with this year is someone in the school, their trusted adult, who is their sort of connected person, regardless of when they move, because they do move. There's a lot of flux and transition in their lives, as we know. One consistent person will make a massive difference to make them feel connected to the school. And if that's one small thing that we can commit to this year, that's something that we've talked about really trying to do in every school. And then from there, we can build on that relationship, understand from that person, other factors that student might need in order to provide more sort of learning supports once we provide that sort of trust and relationship support. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I'll give you an example of the commitment, though. We have an actual committee that has been formed that will be focusing on how do we support our children in care, making that commitment to the So What Now and what are we doing about it.
See Lisa.
Great work, and what I love is the individuality of learning. So I have 3 daughters that learned differently, and their school experience was very different out of the same house. And when I'm looking at this now between literacy and numeracy, but I'm also thinking about that social emotional piece, and when Kathy speaks about our kids and in care, and like, there's some really nasty things going on in our world right now in regards to poverty, in regards to mental health, in regards to addictions, that is infiltrating and embedded in our families. And so for them to be successful in literacy and numeracy, is there another pillar that gets woven into this? And you probably already have it all. I get that end of the health and wellness. Yeah.
We have a framework for that.
Yeah.
It is part, we know literacy and numeracy, they're in our strategic plan as foundational skills.
Yeah.
They are life-changing. If you don't have those skills, they're barriers to your future. So we recognize that. And we recognize that our world that our learners are in are very complex. And how do we help maneuver that in ways that are healthy and empowering to them as individuals? It's hard as educators to recognize that we can't always change the world out here. But how do we ensure that the work that we're doing is the very best that we can offer those learners while we're working with community agencies to make those other differences? So we actually are investing equally in that pillar as we are at the other two.
Right. And then the relationships with the family and the parents, because they need your support as much as. So thank you, just great work.
Trustee Stratton and Trustee Souza.
Really significant shift in how you're approaching programming, and I'm curious, and my son actually enjoys the self reflection as well, but he tends to always write his comments based on what the teacher has said. So if he's developing, he'll tend to, his comments will be around, I need to try harder or whatnot. So it's been kind of comical to watch him go through it. He went through it last year for the first time, and I remember him asking me, like, why am I doing this? And I said, I never got asked anything like that. So enjoy it while you have it, and don't just kind of write with, one line. But, with getting away from the grading and involving the student more in their journey. And, I'm mindful there's pieces of this that are still, I would say, rely on the instructor, the teacher to understand how the child's progressing. So there's a level of subjectivity to that, I would say. But what's your challenge function at the end of the day for the grading and this whole new way of doing business? I imagine you're getting it from your teaching group, from the unions, from the PAC, and you get statistics, you'll get results, but what more is there for you that you can challenge whether you're getting it right? Particularly, I think, for those students that leave the school district and go on to university, and how are they competing? I mean, I don't know if that's something you could ever track, but I'm curious of that. That's a really big question.
That's a big question.
Especially when you're in your infancy, but it's a pretty significant shift.
It is significant. And I would say what I'm encouraged by is our educators' embracement of this. Like, they're really digging in and looking how to bring it to life. But like you said, we're really just at the beginning. We're changing the way that we think about education. We recognize there are those critical pieces, and we're helping these learners grow into independent adults. And I think in a couple of years, when we look at how they bring this to life, I don't think there'll be much question of the importance of what we've done. And when I look at some of the work that our district is doing that really is allowing our students to have their passion projects, like, the climate action pieces that we're doing, we're seeing them have a voice that is a result of some of this work. And I think, in a couple of years, how can we kind of do a check back? I think that's a good thing for us to ponder too.
Trustee Souza.
Yeah, thank you. This is wonderful. And for me, anything that encourages personal agency and a sense of having the ability to have a say in one's sort of educational journey from the get-go, like that just builds, helps with democracy as well. Really creating a sense of what it means to be a good citizen, even if it's not in those terms, like building those sort of foundation pieces by being actively involved and encouraging that. I think it's just fantastic. And so it's so good to see this shift taking place. And just a special shout out around the EA guide in particular. That's fabulous. I think that's just really good and really important and needed. So I'm really glad to see that. So
My turn. I got a bunch of questions here. In your spiral, it's got in there developing a hunch. Tell me about that.
Well, I don't want you're really more deeply involved with noise, so I don't want to take your voice, but I'm happy to. Okay. As educators, we're constantly scanning. We're looking at what we're learning about our students, what they're communicating to us through their behaviors, their actions, their questions, their responses to things. And from that, the first step, it's kind of like the hypothesis. What do we think is going on with our learners? So we're sort of developing that idea of what's happening with them and how can we respond to it and what supports that they need to address those needs.
Yeah, and part of developing a hunch as part of that spiral, part of developing a hunch kind of goes back to your question about what's the challenge function. The challenge function is the data and the analysis that comes afterwards. Were we right? What didn't we know? How does this information that we've now developed add to what we didn't know before? And how many hunches are we developing out there that we need to add some data to? So the developing the hunch is sort of what do we think? And then that's why it's so early in the spiral, because then we have to decide whether or not that hunch is accurate.
And what's really powerful about the spiral is you don't just develop the hunch. We actually go through the process. So we move beyond admiring the problem. Sometimes we get caught into traps of admiring what's going wrong. And this spiral actually challenged us to actually move forward, to respond to it, and then check to see if we made the impact that we wanted to.
Falling through the cracks, as Mr. Thorne talked about. So is this gonna stop kids from falling through the cracks? And how long will that take? And what do we do with a kid in grade 9 who's fallen through the cracks and's got 3 years left with us? How is this going to address that?
Definitely the purpose of this, and I know you don't know about my history before I landed here, but there's a process called multi-tiered system of support. So that whole system is about being very proactive, checking on learners as they're going through the journey to do exactly what you said, catch them before. So instead of waiting until they're in grade 3 or 4 and going, oh, you really can't read the way we had hoped, or write, or numeracy, etc. We're catching those things early so we can intervene. So that's the primary part. Another part of that is recognizing when we have a student that is in grade 9 who isn't empowered as a reader or in any of these skill areas, and they're coming to us and saying, I need these skills. How do we as a system respond to that? And we actually, for the past 2 years at least, if not more, have literacy specialists in our secondary schools teaching students these foundational reading skills in respectful ways. So if a learner is coming to us, and we have had learners coming to us and saying, I don't feel confident as a reader. We had one grade 10 student that said, I just want to be able to read Anne of Green Gables. And someone said to me, well, why don't you just give it to them an audiobook? And that made my heart drop a bit, because I want them to be empowered to read what they want. And so then we have educators. So we actually do have in our secondary schools, individuals who can go back and teach these foundational skills, but not in a classroom. Like you can't teach the reading skills in a classroom that's respectful to a learner.
What about the kid who's not showing up and who doesn't say anything?
We're doing some work on that too. We're recognizing we've had some outreach teachers who have worked with some of our learners to find out. We also have people in hallways asking kids, what's happening. Hannah Morales, who is part of our Indigenous education team, is really like on the ground in schools as well as our sultans. So we're looking at those multiple streams of checking in on our learners, what's happening, and getting their voice so we can draw them in. Kim mentioned earlier the relationship piece. We know that often has to come first. We have to give them a place where they can feel safe enough to give us that information so we can join them in the journey.
And how is that going so far?
We're making some beginning steps. It's a growth plan. We're working on it. We have had some absolute positive stories from Palmichin and Cowichan Secondary in particular about students feeling more confident as readers and actually saying, oh my gosh, I can actually go into a class and be able to read now and not be embarrassed.
What about textbooks? So you made a comment about textbooks and that we don't have the textbooks we used to. What do you mean by that? How are we filling that void?
When many of us were in schools, did we have like a stack of textbooks? know, some of our secondary schools have some textbooks. We're just not as dependent on textbooks to guide our instruction as we were 10, 20 years ago. If you look at our curriculum, it gives lots of room for discovery and inquiry. And so our learning isn't contained to a hard or soft book, but we use the world as our learning.
Thank you, trustee Croft.
So I sort of wanted to take it a little bit, the conversation toward the parents that we were talking about and family support and stuff, and I'll just give you some context. Not that long ago, I was seen as someone who had more of a broad understanding of literacy and learning literacy. So talking from a very 10,000 foot level, and that is said, you know, if you've got an undergraduate degree, don't sweat it. You're not going to screw up literacy for your kid. And I thought, you know, that's, you know, it's one of those beacons that maybe you can rely on. But there 50% of Canadians really struggle with day-to-day reading. So and all that you've done here is great, and you're talking about sending materials home, and that's critical. But I think the fact of the matter is that 50% of our students may well be going home to parents who, after a very low grade level, can't understand those materials that are being sent home and struggle to help their kids. And I mean, I have an undergraduate degree, I have a graduate degree, and there's still stuff, right, that's hard to do for your kids. So where do we go? Because we can't impose on the family. Is it our job? I mean, how do you navigate those kinds of questions, and are there actions building around those kinds of questions?
It's okay if I respond. And you're welcome to too. I don't want to just be sharing conversation. It is our responsibility to do our very best to giving access to families. So when we as a district write or draft things, we are looking through it through an accessibility lens. We're trying to be more thoughtful, to not send things out with a lot of jargon and make it more readable. So we often do in our materials, we look at making it as accessible as possible. That's one. Last year, when we were doing some of the literacy work, we worked with Dolly and Mary and actually did a video that told the story via video. So a lot of the work that Mike does is bring our story to life in a way that is video based for those families as well. And I think we can never, ever take away the power of conversations. And that is happening at the school level with teachers and with administrators as well, with those relationships. So it's multifaceted. You know, certainly there are still families that aren't quite ready to be there with us, but we will never stop opening the door and the invitation to do that.
So there's also some very, I think, kind of frightening research that says that if you can't read, if you have a lower economic status than the teachers in the school community that you're participating in, you're far less likely to ask questions and step up for your child. And that creates an enormous gap in the learning experience. Like you said, everybody, you know, some kids have a great experience, some people have a horrible experience, but to feel alienated on a continual basis is a horrible experience. So I think it's amazing that we are challenging ourselves to create communications that are suitable for everybody. But I think we have to remember, and this is where it's really nice that Carmen and Deepak is here to say, it's a great video, but I'm not sure it's for my audience, right? And so I would challenge you. In fact, I think it's something we all have to challenge ourselves with, is that we can't make assumptions about everybody's background and everybody's understanding. So I've seen the videos, they're awesome. But to be honest, I don't know if they're suitable for our audience. And I mean, I've done audience analysis, and when you sit down and do it, there are a lot of surprises. Anyway, so I just wanted to share that with you. And I don't know if you've had a chance to think about those things, but I think there are things that we all think about.
They absolutely are. And I think the main thing for us to remember is no one strategy is going to meet the needs of all of our families. So we have to be proactively thinking, like videos are one element, face-to-face conversations, starting with relationship, inviting families in, multiple, yes. So multiple streams of communication and approaches is really important.
Hey, any other questions? Hey, this was a lot of reading. It took me a couple days to get through it, but I got through it, and it's much appreciated. And we look forward to the updates on your progress, and wish you well. Thank you.
And I'm sure we've taken less than 30 minutes.
Time too. So, thank you very much. Week 2, Watson School Secondary School update.
Kind of like Darlene, hoping it's all set up. Let's hope it works. There we go. Eichsquale, Machwait. Hello, or good day, everyone. That second word I'm still practicing. It's really good to be here, and I'm really happy to share with you an update around Cowitson. So just Cowitson, secondary updates. So these are the things that I'd like to go. I want to kind of talk a little bit about the timelines, what's been happening in each of the different zones. A little bit around the signage. That's something I don't think has been shared with you yet. And it's, I think it's beautiful work that's been done in that area. Also a little bit of a photo montage. So if you were to walk through there right now, this is some things that you'd see in each of the zones. And then at the very end, questions and answers, because I'm sure you're probably going to have some questions and things for me. Well, to start off, Zone 1, this in fact is Zone 1, and that's where we have our Science Super Lab, that's where we have some learning communities, shops, robotics, and our food classes. So just to kind of orientate you to that particular area, this part of the building is the farthest along. So all of the exterior steel is done, the interior steel studding is completed, the electrical and mechanical rough-ins are all done. Some insulation and backing between studs, that's starting, it's ongoing, and the drywall up on the 3rd floor has actually been started as well. So lots of progress in this, as well as some exterior cladding. So lots of progress in Zone 2. Or sorry, Zone 1. In Zone 2, and this is Zone 2, this is in the very front. We've got all of our offices, careers, counseling. This is where the Black Box Theater is, our band on the 2nd floor. We've got some more learning communities, inclusive education, dance. So that sort of represents this section here. So the exterior framing and the windows are now all complete. The steel studs are all complete. The mechanical and electrical rough-ins are mostly complete. So there's still work going on in this particular area. And the backing, and that's, I'll show you a picture along the way. That's the plywood that goes in. So when you're hanging TVs or whatever, there is backing there for it to be hung on, given that everything is done on steel. So that would be Zone 2. Zone 3 and 4 are a bit of a combo, and this is the area that is the learning commons, the gym, the gathering stairs, the high-tech boardroom, and our NLC spaces. So this is the piece that's not as far along. It is absolutely coming along though. The structural steel has now been completed, which means all of that exterior framing, that's all now been completed, and the steel studs have started. So you're starting to see the different sections being installed, and you can kind of see what's going on. And the glue lamb, which is that beautiful, beautiful wood, that ceiling has now been installed in the areas where that's going in. Most of the floors have been poured. Our Indigenous Culture Center has just been poured, and our gym should be poured within the next 2 weeks. It's going to be weather dependent, but that is coming along. This is actually a picture of the, right now the gym floor is gravel. So that's all that you're seeing there. So zone 3, I think basically zone 4 is the gym, and zone 3 is everything else, but it's all really in that same area. As far as the exterior goes, the cladding continues to go on, mostly in zone 1. It's now started on zone 2 as well. The roofing insulation and membranes, those have been installed in the zones 1 and 2. I think they've started over, well, mostly zones 1 and 2. The playing field was leveled and irrigation has gone. It's kind of an interesting one because it's a soil playing field. They need to make sure there's a 2% grade. And so we were a little bit, I'll use the word, we were a little bit freaked out at first because when we saw the grade and we're standing over here, you actually, if someone was standing at the other far end corner, you wouldn't see their ankles there just because the grade seemed so steep. So we had to have quite a few conversations on what that looked like. It's still got a 2% grade, but we have kind of crowned it a little bit different. So it doesn't look quite so, oh, that's, you know, you're kind of wondering if you're playing soccer, you kind of have a bit of an advantage, right? But so it's been crowned a lot nicer now. So this is a picture here of the crowning. It's really kind of hard to see from that picture, but we were on that field a number of times just to make sure that it's, and basically the reason for the 2% slope is for when it rains, so that the water can drain off, because it's not a sand field, it's a soil field. Fence posts are topsoil. That's going to be the thrilling part because this is a seeded field. So topsoil should be coming in next week. All the irrigation is in, so they should be starting to seed it next week as well, because that's got to get in before the winter comes along. Fence posts are going in, as I was talking about, and they're really focusing on the north side for the landscaping. That's kind of where we're at in each of the different zones. And so I'm going to move into signage. I love this one. So that's the layout for that's going on top of zone 2, sort of just before you go in the entrance. So there was each of the Thunderbird is going to be put up in sections. And some of those parts are between 50 and 75 pounds that they're needing to attach to the wall. So it is quite stunning. So this is part of the signage package. Gives you a little bit of an idea, and just really wanting to. I know it's blurry. There was no way for me to. It's blurry on purpose because that's the way it was given to us. And I just really wanted to point out that we worked really hard to have our signage have a really Indigenous feel to it and be inspired by that. The signage is also taken from Coast Salish design elements of ovals, trigons, and crescents. So you'll see that quite pervasive throughout the signage as we go along. The very top is the ovals, and that's on some of our rooms where all you need is just a room number. That's where what that will look like. If you need a little bit more information, you'll have sort of this piece here, and then an oval may be added or not, depending on the type of signage. And then for some of them, we have some pictographs that go along with it. And in the next slide, I'll show you a little bit closer what some of those pictographs look like. So that's just kind of an outline of what the various signages look like. And these ones down here we're extremely happy with. They are some of our special spaces. And I have a close-up picture of the elder space in a moment that I'll show you. So hopefully you really see the sort of the very Indigenous theme here. So rather than just having a regular toilet or a male or a female, you can see we've worked really hard. So Stuart Padaguin worked with us on all of these things. So this is what the pictograms will look like. And currently, this is sort of the color package for the signage that's going in. This next piece here is, again, just sort of a closer up representation. This will be right on outside of the glazing or the windows at the door of the elder space. So we've got the killer whale. We'll have sort of the name of the space written in Hulkaminum as well as in Braille. And then the room number there. So this one is outside of the elder space. If I back up just a smidgen. This one here is outside of our gathering place or our stamina. This is the indigenous, the indigenous classrooms, yes. And then our elder space. And then these two, one of them is the high-tech boardroom, and then the other one is our office area. So that we're just waiting on the inside. And this is representing the Coast Salish hat. The inside will have sort of some indigenous drawings as well. And then in terms of wayfinding, again, sort of using the oval and the indigenous design elements. This is used for wayfinding. So you'll see them because there's a lot of glass in there. So you've got this sort of going through, giving you some direction. So the directionality will sort of allow people to know, okay, you need to go this way to enter the door, etc. So a lot of nice work has gone into the signage for the school, which I think will really help to just when you walk in there, you'll hopefully really feel that we've been inspired all along with that indigenous element. So now just a little bit of a photo montage. So here's zone 1. So you can see 3rd floor. I think this is one of the science rooms with the drywall. This is the backing that I was telling you about. So where TVs and whatnot are being mounted, and so the installation and some backing, and again just where they're at with some of the drywalling. That's on the 2nd floor, looking down into one of our shops. These were just taken on Friday. This one is a rather interesting one. This is zone 2. This is the office area. So this is like Darcy's office right here. So that's that long back corridor with all of the principals, vice principals' offices, and then all of the counselors' offices, and then the meeting room and the medical rooms, et cetera, on the opposite side. This picture here, I'm not really quite sure why those lines are there. I think that was just sort of jumping from Canva to the PowerPoint, so I apologize for that. That's Darcy standing inside of the Black Box Theater. So that's that place there. And this is the dance room right up above the Black Box Theater, and this is where the skyfold door, the doors will be coming up inside, and both Darcy and I were commenting on the view that dance class is going to have, because that's all going to be glass, and then beautiful windows there, because the dance room looks down into that gathering space. So it's just what a stunning place to practice your it's simply gorgeous. And then this is in zone 3, so a lot of the glue lam work, and you can see we're not anywhere near as far along as the steel studding goes. This is the gym, so just kind of from the 2nd floor looking down, so you can get a real sense of the space. This is this section right here. This is kind of looking, the learning commons would kind of be, the library would be over here, and the gathering stairs are here. So this roof is the roof that when you're inside of that beautiful space. So that's where we are with zone 3. And then I just wanted to one of the areas, because I hadn't personally gone into this space from this vantage point, but this would be one of our NLC spaces, the Island Health. So this right over here would be the doors into Island Health. And so this is us entering in. So this would be the reception area and then off into the offices on either side. And that's where we're at. That was way faster here. I thought I was going to be the one that took forever. Any questions?
Trustee Schmidt.
And we're still on schedule to, when will the district be able to start moving furniture?
That likely be July, August, when that starts happening. Yeah.
Trustee Croft.
So regarding the signage, sort of overall, we have Halkamina, we have Braille, we have English. It's also a French immersion school. Will there be any French in any of the signage?
In the end, no. There just simply wasn't enough space for that as well. And so just in the end, this is where we landed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Thorne.
Just one thing. I look at the whale and I think we've always pictured the whale diving.
Ah.
And when I look at that, it's not the same that the design that we grew up with.
Okay.
And it's common amongst most of the whole Halkamina territory with the other bands. So I just thought I'd make note that it like, oh yeah.
No, that's really good to know. I'm not sure we can make changes, but we can certainly check. And I think the whale is also being incorporated as part of a mural on the elders wall. And so that hasn't been finalized. So we've got that same killer whale with some salmon. And so I can certainly talk to them about seeing if that whale can be diving as opposed to.
So I know we had committees assigned and I had never really participated in any because I was never called. But there are some things that I've seen in here that were not what we talked about way back when.
No, and unfortunately, once we have all those ideas and then it goes to the design people, not everything translates out perfectly. It's the same with the Salish hat. We definitely wanted the signage to look a little bit different, but there were too many. I'm getting into the weeds now and I shouldn't be, but just in the end, too many angles and things for them to be able to reproduce it. So they did need to make things look a little bit different than how we originally intended.
That stands out.
Right.
That stands out.
Yeah. No, it's a fair point. I greatly appreciate you sharing. Yeah.
Trustee Souza.
Thank you. So come July, August, will the entire facility be ready, or so that like when the doors open for the school, will the healthcare center be open and the boardroom, like all of it will be in place and ready to go, the entire, or is it phased in some sort of way?
Superintendent.
I think I'm just going to help show out a little bit. When it comes to the Neighborhood Learning Center, which is the wellness center, yeah, that is a partnership with Island Health. And so going through that process may take a little bit more time than it all being open at the same time. However, when it comes to the school and the boardroom, yes, we anticipate that July is substantial completion. And so we're hoping that we'll be, moving ourselves right over there and in its fullest form.
Mr. Sandquist.
And I'd like to say at this time, that's the schedule, because we're still a year away. And a lot can shift.
Anybody else? I got a couple. Landscaping. Are we still on our original landscaping plan, or has that changed?
No, what we agreed to at the 100% is what is happening, and they are working on that. Yes.
Okay, and water garden
Yep.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What about maintenance? How are we planning on? One of the things this district does not do is keep its grounds up. Now, having said that, Alexander just gets better looking every part of the year. So thank you for that. It's looking really nice, especially with that new paint job. So but what's the plan on maintaining?
Yeah, and so we have worked with the maintenance department around all of this. And we certainly, when we were putting in the landscaping, we were looking for things that were of the least amount of maintenance, knowing exactly that we don't really have the time to go in and manicure gardens and prune back things and whatnot. We've also worked with Darcy in terms of, are there some champion teachers, etc. We did have a garden that was going to be down on the floor that was going to probably require a little bit more maintenance. That's now being moved onto the outdoor classroom up top where teachers will be taking that on. So it will definitely be, students, teachers, and maintenance, but everything that we are putting in, we're trying for it to be as low maintenance as possible. Irrigation's all being put in, all of those types of things. So
Does that change from our original plan?
I don't think it changes from our original plan, no.
Okay. And my last question is, do we have a plan to say goodbye to the old school? Like, I mean, it's been here since the 50s. Should we be building a plan to say goodbye? Build a plan.
Lots of rock and roll.
There's a lot of things going on, and right now I think the detail of the work is about completion, about design, around all those matters. But of course, there's going to be some work around legacy. And so I know that there is also some work that's going to be going into the new school around the legacy, and that is a legacy committee that is at the school site. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
So I think that the board is going to help guide us on a little bit of that goodbye. I think that we always have to honor the historical parts of this and move forward with, a really nice gesture with regard to the final exit of that building.
And the willow tree, how's that coming?
A piece of the willow tree has been taken and is now being grown so that they're going to be able to transfer that willow tree over to the new site.
Class of 57 will be very thrilled with that.
Just so the board knows, I'm going to be talking with Henry again, and I work well. I try not to be there when you guys are there, but I've watched that school rise. I was, one of the things I'd like to suggest to the board is I talk with Henry for our next barbecue and invite the board to come and see the guys and girls and learn about what kind of denominations are working there, the Dominicans, the Filipinos, the Africans, the Caucasians, the First Nations. There's a lot of things going on there. One of the best things I really love about it is what they're doing with some of the stuff that's salvageable in their contaminated lumber. A lot of it going to exhibition grounds, a lot of it going to different organizations. Nothing is being wasted. And I think there's so much that you don't know that's going on at that school. And it's a pleasure to go there. And Henry's a character. For some reason, him and I hit it off really good. I think it's because we're both half nuts. But things happen, and the atmosphere, the working atmosphere is high. And I think you guys need to take a good day one day and say, let's go see Henry and let's have fun out there. And then help me flip burgers.
Trustee Croft.
I don't mean to undermine you, but yeah, I appreciate that. So we were talking about legacy and saying goodbye, and we do have a very long consultation process to go through if, depending on what we're going to do with that one. And I just think that'll be opportunities for us to listen to the community on the future and past and the transition.
Well, to that point, I love the idea of tying the two together as well through that process. What's a good way to say goodbye, and especially asking the alumni and all those who have that connection to the school as well. And I certainly get the priority of like completing the school and getting everyone over there, but also that sense of closure after that and planning for that as part of the whole sort of approach. So, and doing that through the public consultation process as well to get ideas, I think is lovely, because that sense of closure, I think, will be important because the schools play such an important role in the life of the valley and whatnot. And a lot of you here, as I picked up, being a newbie, like you have close ties, and it's really important to honor that as well. And it's part of the shift to the new. The question really is, in addition to that, is when can we go visit again? And it kind of ties to the barbecue idea, but I'm curious to know when we can go and tour again.
Superintendent.
We do have a plan, and at the next board meeting, we're going to discuss a little bit further.
Schmidt.
Absolutely. There's several of us around this table that graduated from that school, so I believe a proper goodbye is in order. One question I have is the big sign that's going to go up that's going to, you know, with the Coastal Secondary and the village, like, no, not the sign on the school, but the big sign itself that we had conversations about. When does that get erected? Yeah, when does that go up?
I would have to defer to the Secretary Treasurer who's in the middle of those meetings.
It's concluded its design phase, and we have to do all the final site work, and then I think it's probably within the next year. It'll all be solar powered, so it won't be running off our electrical grid.
Thank you.
So speaking to, so actually that brings up to me, like, so the marquee sign that currently exists at the corner, that's going to be going over, right?
Yes.
So that's got the old spelling.
Yes.
How's that? Is it going to remain the old spelling?
We're not
Or how are you-
sure about that at this point in time. We just know that's coming over.
Yeah.
We haven't worked through the rest of the details as to the spelling, et cetera. It's a very old sign, but nonetheless, it's a little bit of that legacy.
So that'll be, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Trustee Schmidt.
So just so the board knows, Trustee Thorne referred to barbecues that are happening. And so what's happening over there is every once in a while, some chefs are being brought in, and they bring a very nice meal to all the workers on site. So Trustee Thorne sent me a video one day of all the workers lined up in their seats getting served a very nice lunch. So they're really being honored over there as they trudge through this beautiful project that they're doing and bringing up our school. And so I think that might be what he was referring to, is coming in flipping some burgers. They do tend to bring in professional chefs to feed the crew every once in a blue moon, just to say thank you. So that's what he was referring to.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. All right, administrative procedures.
All right.
Superintendent.
Thank you very much. In your package on page 122. New APs revised, or some that are being removed, but you can see that we've gone through each and every single one of them. There's a lead person attached to each one. I think we're proud of this work because it's the work that we've been trying to do ever since the last few years, and we're now attending to it. And so you can see the first one would be the development of further development on the district code of conduct. The district needs a code of conduct. Every school needs a code of conduct. And so it has been revised. And so you can see in the notes here that's updated to include educative, preventative, and restorative practices to be considered when addressing conduct concerns. And so this is, we really look to how do we educate our people, whether they be young people, middle people, or even older people, and how we actually approach how we need to conduct ourselves. So in this new district code of conduct, you'll see it's there. It helped us to be able to remove AP 358, which is on intimidation, harassment, and aggression. This has been captured in the new AP around the district code of conduct. So as we move forward, you know, we have new safe caring in orderly schools, a guide by the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And so you'll see that within this district code of conduct, there has been some updated things and some revisions that allow us to move forward. And how do we actually address conduct that maybe isn't the way we want it to be. So there's that one. Moving on to AP 205 around sensitive issues, it's also been revised. Been revised to remove he, she pronouns and include gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation as topics that may be perceived as sensitive issues. And so you can see that we've adjusted that one as well. And then moving on, AP 303, this supports fee-paying international students. We stumbled upon some things about a year or two back that we had to look at a revision around this, and this AP was reviewed and updated to reflect our current practice. And then moving on to AP 306, out-of-province student registration. This AP is new. It outlines a process for out-of-province students that are not international students. And so they still are fee-paying students. And so I think that we had to rectify that with an AP that showed that, because you need to be a student who lives in the province in order to be funded by our province. And so we had to update that AP. And then moving on to AP 315, student illness, injury, and concussion. We've really detailed this particular AP out, and it is updated to include procedures to address head injuries. And so if there's a head injury at a school, there is a protocol and there is an actual document that outlines what is expected and what to do and what not to do with regard to those head injuries. And so we feel very up to date on that. And then last but not least, an AP on 356, use of age-restricted and psychoactive substances during school-sponsored activities. And so it also has been revised, and it was revised to reflect changes to the legal status of many drugs, as well as to put in place oversight on age-appropriate harm reduction, education, and schools. So there is a list. We do go through the process around all of this. We do take it to our principals and our vice principals so that they're well aware of it. And we also bring it to this table for the process for it to go into our highlighter, as well as our whole system to be aware of these APs. I think that for many of us, the detail is definitely there. And so they're here for our entire community to be able to look up and go back to when in need. This is what we do. And it's really around that process. That's a bit of an overview.
Thank you. Any questions?
Sometimes I think you're just hoping I don't put my hand up. So I have two questions. One is, sometimes I ask because I think it might be in other people's minds too, is that all of these APs do fall out of policy, right? And board activity like our community care and that kind of thing. So it's all sort of double checked to align, not check, but it aligns with that. Can you explain that relationship?
Well, it's quite an interesting relationship. Sometimes we have policies and sometimes we have APs. And I think that I do rely on the Secretary of Treasurer's office to help us out on that. And so I think some of these APs have been looking to be, they've been under construction for a number of years. They've been there for us to revise or to make current. I would say that it's a big job to constantly be looking at policy versus APs, but the whole idea is policy is the vision, and that's what the board is responsible to look at, and then the APs is to operationalize those. So I wouldn't know that in detail whether it goes from exactly a policy to some of these APs, but it would be under a certain area.
Inspired.
I like that language.
May I follow up?
Yes.
Thank you. And then I think one of the questions I might get from the public is that when I look into code of conduct, I don't see the words social media or online. I don't presume we're drawing any. Was any thought given to that, or?
We have an absolute separate AP that has everything to do around social media, because it is probably up to around 4 to 5 pages that outlines in detail exactly how we need to conduct ourselves around social media. And I believe it's been brought to this table, but like I said, sometimes these details are so large and wide that they're there as a guide, and so we go back to them. But we do have that, and it was, I believe, revised about a year ago or less.
Trustee Lisa.
So in regards to like the code of conduct, in other places where I've worked or been, every employee and every person goes through the code of conduct and actually signs it. You don't have a signing?
No, we do not have a sign. We do not have a sign, but I think that when we orientate our new people who come to, when they're employed with us, we let them know there's a district code of conduct. We're working with every single one of our managers that we have a sample code of conduct that they can actually use to actually develop their own, depending on the circumstance. So let's say in operations per se, they would be expected to have their own code of conduct and review it with their staff. But it wouldn't be signed.
So one thing I like to say, policy belongs to the board. Administrative procedures belong to the superintendent and not to the board. So any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Going on, Student and Family Affordability Fund. Is that you? You're right.
Thank you. The question came up at the recent advisory committee as to how the funding for the Student and Family Affordability Fund was expended last year, and was it all expended? And so here is a very quick report that shows that last year the funding received was $880,984, and that was one-time funding intended to help families alleviate financial pressures that they may have been experiencing due to the recent and high inflation. So the board spent $525,000 of that on ensuring food security for students. So that's just the in-school food program. The second part that the board expended was for supplies and equipment. So that was school supplies, exercise books, musical instruments, yearbooks, field trip fees, for instance, grad fees, activity day fees, school store punch cards, post-secondary application fees, school photos, and athletic gear. So that the board expended $161,327 roughly in that category. And this may kind of overlap a little bit. This is just how the schools had reported them. And then there's family assistance, and these were the distribution of gift cards, many of those used to buy groceries, gasoline, clothing, footwear, pharmacy, some essential healthcare services. It's a little bit smaller category here of $30,653. So in total, $717,000 were spent. And there's $163,497 that is left over in the hands of the schools that didn't spend it, for those schools that still have it. And we have a contingency left at the board office of approximately $25,000 yet to be distributed. That's included in that number. So when we first received these funds, they were intended to all be expended in that year. And as we went through the year, the ministry softened that requirement and allowed districts to carry those over.
Questions? Anything else?
I know that's it.
Trustee Souza and Trustee Croft.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see this. And I see it's not like, especially with the contingency, there isn't a huge difference between expenditure and funding received. But I'm curious if there's like a particular area amongst these three where there was more of an underspend as opposed to the others, and if there was any particular set of reasons for that. Just curious.
We didn't distribute it in these particular categories. This was up to the schools who knew their school communities the best to determine how it was going to be spent. And so, specifically school by school, we have different levels of underspend, but not particularly in a particular category. So some of our schools that were, we might call more of our inner city, had a higher draw on the funding and were supported with additional funds in the month of June because they'd already gone through it. And some of our schools still have some money that makes up that I'll just say it's approximately $135,000 that's still at the school level. So we didn't underspend any particular category because they weren't given to us, but rather than some schools just spent a different pattern. Does that make sense?
I was just wondering if you could refresh me on 2 or 3 things. And one is under food security, we actually directed a significant portion of that $525,000 directly to Nourish, right? It was in the order of 300,000 plus.
320,000.
Yeah. So that went
That's
directly
included in that number.
Right. So that went directly to them. And then two more refreshers, please. The one being, at one point, I thought we had to have it all spent by June. That changed. So they changed the goalposts in October on that one. And then the other one, and you were talking about how is it sort of structured in terms of distribution. I believe there was a requirement. We actually couldn't put any of this into administrating the fund, right? We had to absorb that.
Correct.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was really good money. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so, now we have the Feeding Futures Fund, and it focuses just on the number one category, food security.
It's a lot more, right?
$1,018,887.
Is there a deadline when we have to have this last amount spent?
Well, they haven't indicated, the province has not indicated that. I think the expectation would be that it's expended this year, and so we'll need to be managing that because they've given us new funding for food security. It was, at this point, our approval is to carry it over 1 year.
And are we gonna be able to carry over some of those things like helping students get government issued ID? All those things that we were doing that really aren't in the book?
Well, the rules remain the same for the 163,497 that's remaining. So anything that has been expended here would be eligible still throughout those remaining funds.
What happens if we don't spend it all this year? Do we have a plan to spend that?
I think at the rate it was spent last year, it'll likely go out. We'll have to do some analysis if we get partway through the year and we see that certain schools have not spent it and certain schools have spent all of theirs, and maybe there's a rebalancing of the need to make sure that those funds all get out in the next year. Okay. But at this time, the ministry hasn't given us any direction beyond carrying it over for the next year.
Okay. Trustee Souza.
So conceivably, since the first category of food security is being taken care of with the new fund, but conceivably the other two categories would be for the 163 would be for the other two categories. So
it can also be for additional food security.
Okay. Any other questions? I have a comment as I was watching Global BC NewsHour last night. There was a story on Merge Couchin, which was a great story. And then anytime I see stories like that, the question that I always have is, and it can't be answered here, but what are we doing about it? Like, it seems so easy for governments to throw money at this, but nobody seems to be coming up with a solution, an economic solution, so people don't have to access those types of funds. Yeah, it's always a big question. But great story on Nurse Couch, and you can probably find it on the website, global website, if you haven't seen it. So, moving to that, motion to adjourn. Sorry, go ahead.
Item 9.
Oh, sorry.
1.1.
Item 9, highlights of the September 19th, 2023 advisory committee meeting. Sorry, Elizabeth.
Well, I think probably one of the highlights, a really fulsome conversation around the celebration and the observance, I should say, of National Truth and Reconciliation Day, and that became tied to a conversation about the commercialization aspect of the t-shirts and the sweatshirts and that kind of thing. And the conversation seemed to move towards more of a, if we have to use the word branding, towards more of a every child matters, and that should be our focus rather than the word or the term orange shirt. And so I think that was a really important conversation that people felt very passionate about. Thank you for the opportunity to share. And if I may add before we wrap, I would just like to say this has been an excellent meeting, and Ms. Trustee Dolman, I want to thank you for that, because there's a lot of opportunity to ask questions and to really look deeply into things, and I appreciate that opportunity. So thanks for letting it go where it needed to go.
So, motion to adjourn.
Mover and a seconder.
Oh, Trustee Schmidt, Trustee Lise, In favor? Thank you very much. We will see you next week.